The Neumann algebra and various other complex operators, all of which figured into the project in terms of the theoretical background required. Another man who's well known, T. Townsend Brown, was born in 1905. He made his contributions during the war. 1912, the most important man of all, probably no one has ever heard of, was a man who was born in the U.S. in 1912, Dr. Norman Levinson. You can hear little and learn little about him, except he wrote many books on math, but the most important work, that dealing with the time equations and the time matrix, is still classified. But he was a professor of math, assistant up until 1955 at MIT, and after 1955, full professor till he died in 1976, I believe. These men all made their contributions in a theoretical sense, absolutely essential, because what they were dealing with and were attempting to do was play games with our reality. Most people have been taught that we live in a three-dimensional world. Three physical dimensions, we're all familiar with them, we're all taught about them. And there is, of course, a fourth called time. In 1831, P.D. Ouspensky wrote a book entitled Tertium Organum, a new model of the universe, in which he described our reality as being actually five-dimensional. I've since seen some papers which describe it as six-dimensional, but we won't get into that because that's a rather obscure element. The fourth and the fifth, as they found, are both time dimensions. The fourth is the linear component or vector, which is usually described as the flow of time. The fifth was a rotating spinner around the end of the other vector, if you will, which describes, and I'll go into this in my workshop, a locus or circle, a corkscrew, if you will, and that determines the flow rate of time. That was the element which we were playing games with back in the project, which Tesla was working on. And in 1936, they had their first test, which was partly successful. In 1940, there was a fully successful test in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. That involved a small tender with special equipment, and they put it in the Navy Yard. Okay. They put it in the Navy Yard, ran the test, it was fully successful, but with no personnel on board. That is important because of what happened later. The hardware worked, the ship became invisible. However, other problems developed at a later time. As I'm getting patched up all over the place here, it begins to remind me of some of the days back then. Now, where did I enter the picture, as well as my brother, Edward Cameron? As I said, I was born 4 August 1916, my brother 1917, same father, different mothers. Father was quite a rake. He was in the Navy at that time as an enlisted man, as a bosun's mate. Don't know exactly when he enlisted because you cannot find any records on this. He did, however, go through the World War I period, stayed on, and I just found that he was still in the Navy in 1939 as Captain Arnold. Why Arnold, as I will explain. His real name was Cameron. And we do not know even to this day when he finally left the Navy. But he made many important connections. We were raised, and we went into the years, of course, through high school, and there was depression on us. We went to college, and the family had lots of money. The Arnolds had married into the family, and there was the Arnold Constable store in Brooklyn and New York. And came the time appropriate, I went to Princeton, and later, at Neumann's suggestion, I transferred to Harvard and took a PhD in math in the summer of '39. My brother, Duncan, decided to go to a different school. He went to the University of Edinburgh, Scotland, took a PhD in math there in 1939. On September '39, thanks to our father rolling out the red carpet in advance for us, we both enlisted in the Navy, were given commissions, went to Providence, Rhode Island for about 3 months, what they call the 90-day wonder school, and were taught what officers are supposed to know in the Navy. And then we were assigned immediately to the Institute as our project. We quickly learned that the physics that we had learned in school was far from the whole story, was far from complete. We quickly found out about new mathematics, new approaches in time, etc., and what the project was really all about that we were to work on, namely how to make a ship invisible. We joined before the test at Brooklyn Navy Yard. We learned a lot of theory. We helped in construction of equipment. There was the later phases. The heavy equipment was not built at the Institute. So I met Tesla and Van Neumann, and so did my brother. There we were in the Navy. We were writing reports for them at an office in the Philadelphia Navy Yard, as well as an office down at the Institute. So came the successful test in later part of 1940. They immediately classified the project, and it was renamed Project Rainbow. And a certain gentleman in the White House, then known as Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was elated because he was a Navy man and he had been pushing the funding of this project. And of course, Tesla, who had already been named director in 1934 by Mr. Roosevelt, was also elated. Roosevelt said to his friend, he says, "Well, I have full confidence in you. If you can make a small ship invisible, I'm going to give you a battleship. If you can make that invisible, you can make anything invisible." So we had his battleship, and the progress of the project went onward from that point under classified wraps. In January 1941, the Navy decided that Duncan and myself had to find out what the Navy was all about and go out to sea. So we were placed on the USS Pennsylvania from January 41 until approximately October, when the Pennsylvania came into Pearl Harbor and it dried out for overhaul. All a matter of public record. We spent a lot of time there and then went to San Francisco. And on the 5th of December, we were about to board the plane to go back to Pearl Harbor. This is 5th of December 1941. We were stopped at the door by a captain who said, "Your orders are canceled." Follow me, and we were taken upstairs to meet with Hal Bowen Sr., Rear Admiral, who was then director of the Office of Naval Engineering, now known as the Office of Naval Research. They changed the title in 1946. He told us, "Gentlemen, your orders are canceled. We know that the Japanese are going to attack us within the next 48 to 72 hours, probably Pearl Harbor. You're much too valuable to us to have you go back there. You will stay in San Francisco, do some paperwork, because that's the home port for the Pennsylvania, and when your time for the tour of duty is over, you will be returned to the Institute. You'll then have no leave time and lots of hard work, so make the most of it in the meantime." And we did. What sailor has never had a good time in San Francisco? Back to the Institute in 42. Preparations were underway for the battleship test. We met Tesla and all the other people involved. Tesla was very upset. He knew there was going to be a very serious problem with personnel. He was afraid there'd be some dead personnel. So we went to the Navy for more time to make corrections. They refused to give him more time, said, "You have an assigned test date. There's a war on." Where have we heard this before? And just meet your test date, do what you have to do, but you have a date, make it. Tesla had two choices. One was to go ahead with the test and hope for the best. The other was to sabotage the test or otherwise cancel it, which he did. He sabotaged it by detuning the equipment so there would be no effective invisibility and consequently no effect on the personnel. The test was a failure. He so declared it, first time in his history, and said, "We have a very good man here to take over, Dr. John Van Neumann. He will be your new director." And he was. It wasn't too long after that, of course, Tesla turned up dead, 7th of January 43, in his hotel room in New Yorker, and of course the world knows the balance. Van Neumann took over, said he would have to find out what was wrong, quickly found out what was wrong, decided to take advantage of the time and totally redesign the equipment. The original approach by Tesla was what would be called an analog approach. All the equipment was on continuously, but was modulated with 4 separate different waveforms, very complex, in which they were using 2 modalities. One was a power generator at a certain frequency to drive 4 Tesla coils, not the typical type Teslas, but conically or derived ones. Now we're on the top, sitting on the deck of the ship, driven with high pulsed power in the later version, continuous analog power in the earlier version, plus 4 RF transmitters of 0.5 megawatt each, of which the antenna was sitting someplace up on the mast, and was later a very special antenna on the Eldridge. 2 megawatts of RF power plus the power derived for those coils, Tesla knew that there would be trouble because up to that point in history, so far as we knew, no human body or mind had ever been subjected to that much electromagnetic energy. He bowed out. Tesla redesigned the equipment, Van Neumann redesigned the equipment. He went to a pulsed mode, upped the power of the transmitters to 2 megawatts each, CW rating, which says at a 10% duty cycle, you had approximately 80 megawatts of power, peak power, being pumped into an antenna which was designed by T. Townsend Brown and put on the highest point on the Eldridge. The ship, the Eldridge, was not known by that name at its initial inception, but that was, of course, the name dubbed on it later, DV-173. Among other things that were decided upon was in the spring of '42 that Van Neumann wanted a special ship chosen and selected from the ground up, right off the drawing board, which was about July of '42, and which would be specially outfitted for this experiment. They had two very large generators, a 75 kVA each, to be put in the hold, so they left them a two-gun turret unfinished and dropped them in there, mounted them up down below, and then slid into the final resting place. Also a very large diesel-electric generator to power this equipment, about 8 megawatts worth. Rather large. They needed a ship of sufficient size, but they didn't want something the size of a battleship. They wanted something straight off the waves. They also decided to have a special, selected, trained volunteer crew. So the crew went out in the Navy, and some 33 volunteered. They were trained between September and December of '42, or ready after that point. And strangely enough, who was the head of the class, if you will, the schoolmaster, my father. Her pictures still are retained of this, and it's part of my slideshow, which I do during the workshop. So things went on when the ship was launched, went into dry dock, and all the equipment was installed, and it went to dockside in the Philadelphia Navy Yard. In '43, they started equipment tests. About March of '43, Van Neumann also became shaky and decided that it was a personnel problem. There would be one. We insisted. We finally agreed. Tried to make some corrections to the equipment. Was unsuccessful with a third generator and went back to the original approach in June of '43 with some complications. But we were ready for the actual test come July. Test date was chosen, 20 July '43, was pushed to 22 July. At that date, all of the personnel involved, my brother and I, were chosen to run the equipment. I presume that wasn't decided from the beginning. And we were in a special hold of the ship to run all the equipment. Now understand, in those days, there were no computers. So everything had to be run by hand or some type of very exotic electric relay that shows the former approach, personnel running the equipment. In that morning, we were out on station in Philadelphia Harbor. The order came by radio at 1000 hours, proceed with the test. If any of you have seen the movie, The Philadelphia Experiment by E.M.I. Thorne, the first part of that 12 minutes or so is very accurate, except for the date. So all the equipment was turned on, and for about 15 to 20 minutes from the observer ships, especially one carrier, with Dr. Van Neumann on board and his assistants, the ship became optically and radar invisible. Remember, in 1940, there was no concern about radar. We didn't have any decent radar then, but by '43, under pressure war development, we had excellent radar. And in '43, the German submarine fleet was seeking approximately one-half of all our shipping going across the Atlantic. The desire was to provide some type of cloaking device which hopefully the Germans, with their radar, could not see through it, that is, the invisibility screen, and the ships could get through without being sunk. The test was completely successful so far as the hardware was concerned. After 20 minutes, the order came, return to dockside, which we did, and then they found they had a problem. The personnel who were deliberately stationed on deck as part of the test were running around nauseous, totally out of it, wandering and absolutely bewildered and ill. So the Navy pulled the crew off, said they gave us a new crew, and Van Neumann then knew we had a serious problem, as the rest of us did. Those below decks were not affected because they were shielded by the steel. So he decided he had to do something. He went to the Navy for more time. They told him, no way. We're giving you a final drug dead date of the 12th of August. No way. We're giving you a final drug dead date of the 12th of August, 1943. Complete your test by then or forget it. So we worked night and day, and we realized, of course, we couldn't make any major changes. But the Navy made one change in requirement. You don't have to have optical invisibility. After all, in those days, there were no satellites, no LORAN, no SHORAN. You were dependent upon either radar or direct optical viewing to know where another ship was in the fleet. So they relaxed the requirement. Didn't know a thing. So we were all a bit ready and a bit apprehensive on the morning of the 12th of August, 43. Went out on station. 900 hours came the order, turn on the equipment, which we did. For the first 60 or 70 seconds, to an outside observer, and there were 3 observing ships at that trip, and that point, a carrier, a smaller ship, and a merchant marine ship known as the SS Freyaseth. It appeared to be very successful. You could see the ship through a haze, a greenish haze, but it was invisible on radar. And after about 70 seconds, there was a flash of blue light, and the ship vanished totally, right out of the harbor, gone. There was absolute pandemonium and panic among the Navy ranks, and by Dr. Van Norman. We could not contact the ship by radio at all. About 4 hours later, the ship returns to the harbor in the same location where it had been, and they immediately spotted through the binoculars that there was something wrong. Part of the mast was broken off and missing. There was some superficial structure damage, and nobody responded to the radio. Send a launch out for seeing what was wrong. They found out as soon as they boarded the ship what was wrong. You had 2 sailors dying in the deck, embedded in the steel. 2 in the bulkheads embedded in the steel. The 5th man with his hand embedded in the steel bulkhead. He lived, put his hand off, gave him an artificial hand later. And of those who were on deck, some were missing, others were wandering around in a complete state of mental hysteria, insanity in plain language. They were removed to the funny farms where they lived out their lives, which wasn't very long in most cases. Those below decks were essentially unharmed, except for one man who did the invisibility number periodically. But of course, they had to put another crew on board the ship to bring it back. It was otherwise undamaged. Brought it back to dockside with 4 days of inquiry. What went wrong? I was there to give my testimony, but my brother Duncan was not. He was missing, insofar as the 1943 Navy personnel were concerned. Now, what happened so far as we were concerned? We were on the inside. We were in the control room, and approximately 30 seconds after all equipment was on and operational, things started to flicker and glow strangely and then to arc over. There were strange electrical arcs inside that room. It continued to get worse. Finally, we decided, because we had been trained what to do in an emergency if it occurred, and we had one, turn the power off. So we grabbed the main power switches, pulled on them. They wouldn't budge. Couldn't move them. And the conditions were getting worse. So we decided out of there, out on deck, to see people running around. At that point, there was no one embedded in the decks. And pandemonium was, at that point, all over. We decided, we had a bright idea, jump overboard. We land in the bay, we can swim ashore. We jumped overboard. We didn't wind up in the bay. We wound up standing on dry land in an inside perimeter of a military installation, which we later found out was Montauk, Long Island, at approximately 2 a.m. in the morning. It was dark. Suddenly there was a bright light overhead, a spotlight, a powerful searchlight on a helicopter. We didn't know anything about helicopters at that point, because Sikorsky was still trying to sell them to the government in 43. And we were grabbed in peace and taken to an elevator down below. The elevators opened on a lower level because there were 6 levels of underground in Montauk. We were met by an elderly civilian. Said, "Gentlemen, I've been waiting for you. I'm Dr. Van Neumann." We looked at him and said, "You're who?" So I'm Dr. Van Neumann. He said, "You can't be. We just left him an hour or so ago, and he was a much younger man." He said, "I know." So I am the same man. You are no longer in 1943 or in 1983, and you're at Montauk, Long Island. I said, I'm the same man you knew 40 years ago. They gave us the Cook's tour. We didn't believe it. Could you blame us? He gave us the Cook's tour of the underground. And when we saw modern computers, graphic displays, color television, huge panels of displays, and a few other things, and we were there half a day. If you watch color TV for half a day, you quickly get the idea something's wrong. Very, very wrong. Jet aircraft? We didn't have those things in 1943. The Germans did, but we were still working on them. But they weren't large ones, or modern ones, and not commercial transports. Many other things. We were convinced. And they told us we had to go back to the Aldrich. They would send us. We had to destroy the equipment because the two experiments had locked up and created an artificial reality called a bubble in hyperspace. The ship was in it. They could not control it. But they could send us back. We asked, how could you possibly do that? So because we have complete control over space and time here, this Phoenix Project, which was its correct name, has solved the problems of space and time. We can send you right back to the decks of the Aldrich, and then you will then do whatever you have to do to smash the equipment. So they did send us back that same day. We smashed the equipment with axes. Eventually the generators started to wind down, the field started to dissipate. They did not instantaneously dissipate. We then went out of the control room at that point and saw the people buried in the decks and in the bulkheads. My brother Duncan, for whatever reason, panic or whatever, we still don't know, jumped overboard before the fields had collapsed and wound up back in 1983. It's a long and difficult story, but he died there, was born into another body in 1963, the body having been sired by our same father in 1951 with his fifth wife. We had one more after that, too. He's quite a man. In any case, he stayed there. I went back, and I gave my testimony. Eventually, Dr. Ben Neumann believed me. I stayed in the Navy until 1947, was assigned to Los Alamos, New Mexico, the famous Los Alamos laboratories, which nobody knew about until 45. I worked for the Navy. In 1947, they decided I knew too much, was asking too many questions, and did a number on me. They did probably the granddaddy of all burial numbers. I was accused of espionage. I was taken to Washington, D.C. The charges were dropped, but I was shipped out to Montauk, Long Island, the same base, but in 47 it was known as Fort Hero. And while it was an underground, there was no then operating Phoenix Project. There was a certain point on the base I was taken to, surrounded by armed guards, and said, you stand there in the middle and don't move. So I did. Suddenly I wasn't there anymore. I was back in the underground in 1983, Montauk. And I was told by Dr. Ben Neumann that he had no control over what was going to happen to me, but they're going to bury me into another family back in the 20s, totally brainwashed, after doing the age regression number on me and reducing me to the equivalent age of 1 and the equivalent size of a person of age 1, which is a small baby. They did it, alien technology. I became an Al Bielek in the Bielek family sometime in 27. I say sometime in 27 because the birth certificate says I was born March 31, 1927. There was somebody born by that name on that date. Before my legal mother, Albertina Bielek, died in a nursing home, she recalled in her mind wandering, as so often happens with older people at that point, and looked at me blankly and said, the baby is dead, isn't it? Well, there was only one child in the family. That was allegedly me. So I had largely my answer. I was a substitute for a child that apparently either had died or they had been told died. The adoption was arranged somehow through the years, and then they were brainwashed. Brainwashing does not last forever. You have to be hit repeatedly to keep it buried, because the subconscious will eventually, by some means, force those memories up to the conscious level, even if it's only in dreams. Well, I grew up again as Al Bielek, went through school, joined the Navy in 1945, became an electronic technician. I liked the Navy. And And after that was over, went to school, was an electronic engineer for 30 years, from 1958 to 88, retired in 88, having been a consultant most of those years. And was in January of 88, after watching HBO one night at 4 a.m., seeing for the first time the movie entitled The Philadelphia Experiment. It hit me like an atom bomb, and I realized I had been part of that project. So I called up I had already met through other circumstances, my brother, and a person he was working with in the Long Island area, called him and said, "Hey, I was part of the Philadelphia Experiment." He said, "Yeah, we know." He says, "What do you mean you know?" He says, "We've known it for the last month and a half. They have regressed Duncan under hypnosis to 1963 in his current lifetime, and then there was a quantum leap to 1943, and he was on the decks of the Eldridge, and there, as he recalled, was I and a few other people he knew. He had never seen a movie or read a book, but under hypnosis he recovered it. Other people have turned up since to corroborate the story. I have no hard proof for the simple reason the government has denied not only does the experiment exist, or did it ever happen. Oh yes, it was an outrage. But their version of when it was launched and when in the service is not quite what I remember, and everyone else connected with it remembers. And to this day they have said, "I shall never have the records through a third party. They will never talk with me directly, nor my brother." But there are other aspects which I wish to get into. Don't have too much time. I'm going to state, among other things, there is a new book. You've probably seen others. The Philadelphia Experiment and Other UFO Conspiracies, because it was a UFO conspiracy, written by myself and Brad Steiger. We have them here for sale. If you're interested in buying them, a security man down there will take care of it. But many other aspects turned up as time went on. The Phoenix Project was very important to all of this because it was a follow-on for the Philadelphia Experiment. The Philadelphia Experiment actually was reopened in 1947. Van Neumann was asked to reopen it. By 1953, he found the problems and had already produced an answer. Well, first of all, the development of the modern electronic computer, which he is the father of, by 1951-52 with Dr. Goldstein. And a complete working system was delivered to the Navy, which was tested with no problems. Today we have such things as the B-1 bomber, everyone's heard of it, but do you know that the, shall we say, the third or fourth generation brainchild of the Philadelphia Experiment provides invisibility cloaking for the B-1, for the B-2, the stealth bomber, not the fighter, and also for our supercarriers today. The equipment did not die, nor did the project. It was resurrected in secret under the aegis of the Phoenix Project in 1953. They changed the name again. Phoenix Project, very briefly, involved research into mind control, invisibility, and time manipulation, time and space control, which was the final portion of the project, which started in 75. Precursor work was back to 63, and the hardware was functional from about 75 with many changes until 1983 when it collapsed. Under that aegis, many things were done with the Phoenix Project. I was part of it as Al Bielek, as was my brother, still Duncan Cameron. Same name both times. Father arranged a lot of things. And even though he died legally in 1981, we reasonably lived on for some years after that. We were part of that project and many others, and we'll go into this in the workshop. The point I wish to make is the government has had many secret projects. Through the years, I'm sure many of you have learned little bits and pieces, sometimes through the supermarket tabloids, sometimes through friends that have been working on secret projects that can't stand it anymore and talk. I don't know if anyone really knows how many secret projects the government has had running and how many of them have involved extraterrestrials, particularly since the 50s. Eisenhower made his agreement with the Greys in 1954, and that opened the Pandora's box. Many underground bases, underground railroad systems, God knows what else. John Lear gave you something of an idea of what is involved. I don't think the two of us together, or maybe a dozen of us together, could really piece the whole picture together. But I survived it. My mind started to come back to the realities of what had occurred in May '86 on the Phoenix Project, because I was back out on the island visiting. I was given the grand tour of the old base. The fields there are very, very stimulating, and that's what is needed to the subconscious to force these memories back and up into the conscious level. The Phoenix Project recall came first. That was the most recent project that I've been on. Then the Philadelphia experiment came in January of '88. Dr. Van Orman is still alive today, though in hiding. And there is one other project, scientist still alive today, also in hiding. I've not been able to get to talk with either one of them, though attempts have been made. And I can prove, as I will, in the workshop, that Dr. Van Orman did live at least until about 1980. And I know he was here much later. The public record says he died of cancer in 1957. Not so. Government cover-up. If there are any questions, for a few minutes I'll attempt to answer them, because I get cut off here in another 6 minutes. Right here in the front row.
They didn't seem to have the usual force that it had. The design is very alien.
The B-2 is a very strange combination of flying wing technology, originated originally by Jack Northrop back in the 20s and the 30s, and of course he built some flying wings, the B-47, let's see, the B-46 I think it was called, was it 30, I'm sorry, the 35. The 36 followed on it and won the final contract from the Air Force, but they built quite a number of them and they were scrapped. He went into retirement, and then later it was resurrected for the B-2. It is built by Northrop. Much technology has been added since those days, and some very strange design factors to make it radar, shall we say, radar elusive without an invisibility factor. There are very special coatings on that aircraft. I've seen the material. It is not just a paint. It is a very thick, plastic-like material which is applied to the whole surface. Next question.
So what happened to the men that were embedded in the steel? Was it reversed the process?
They all died. They all died. I was part of the burial detail. They cut the steel decks and the bulkheads out with a torch and buried them, steel and all.
Hey, I would like to ask you, is there currently any people telling you after of distortions of time and space for the mind control project? I know I have heard of that.
That is true. The more sophisticated mind control techniques today use a very strange form of spatial time distortion. I know of at least one case, perhaps there are many, many more, where a person has the right and left lobes of the brains separated and split so that one side, let's say the right lobe, is a normal personality, the left lobe is developed into a separate personality, so that person has worked on two jobs in one day. First 8 hours as a normal person, or the other way, it doesn't matter. Then they're taken back 8 hours to the point where they started in the day, and the personality is switched, and they do the second job for the same company, and the same day, the same 8 hours. At the end of the day, a friend of mine had been doing this for years, and they finally found out what was going on, and they pulled him right off the project, and it ended. But he was so fatigued at the end of the day, he couldn't do anything to go home and eat, watch TV, and go to bed. He was running his own business. He now can. In the back there, the gentleman in the sweater.
The sailors that were embedded in the steel plates, could this be a side effect that was later developed to take abduction victims to close doors, windows, ceilings?
I'm sorry, I hold the labor for what?
To, let's say, take abduction victims through closed windows, doors, ceilings.
That was done by aliens. As far as I know, we do not have that kind of technology. The question was the problem with the sailors embedded in the steel plates later developed into a means for abduction of people? To the best of my knowledge, no, that's strictly an alien technology, and that's not developed here. You don't know here.
Where's Duncan Cameron today?
No, no.
The same base.
He was part of the Phoenix project, but he's now working as a carpenter, trying to keep himself alive. Tomorrow, okay, the lady right in front.
Question about that, like, why was it at the head?
Why would they let me live? One of the long parts of the story I go into in the workshop is the history of Morris Jessup, a well-known, internationally known astronomer. He paid the price of martyrdom, as they say, because he investigated the Philadelphia experiment from 55 to 59. He was going to tell a friend of his about it, a Dr. Valentine in Florida, and possibly go public. It was found out what he knew. And either on the way to Valentine's, or as I understand now, after he left Dr. Valentine's, he was apprehended, taken to a park, given a monoxide treatment with the usual hose, found dead the next morning in his car. Now the procedure is that anyone who goes in the public view, telling secrets, if you will, if they have a large backing following in the public, they will not repeat that mistake, because to do so puts the bottom line on it, which says, yeah, that guy or that lady must have really known something because they did him in. So they give you the silence treatment, and that is exactly what I've had, the silence treatment. One other question there in the back.
So are you saying that today, government can control time, manipulation, and control?
We've been doing it since the 70s. Okay, the books will be out in the lobby for sale if you wish. And at this point, I think I'll have to close because time has run out. I thank you very much for your attention. We look forward to the workshop.